Hey everybody, welcome back to Truth Revealed. I'm your host, Sergio Denaro, and today we have a really cool statement to look at. I'm looking at the statement that Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback of the New York Jets football team, made when he did an interview with Pat McAfee on the Pat McAfee Show. Now, if you've been following this in the media, you know there's a bunch of controversy around whether or not Aaron Rodgers had anything to do with the head coach of the New York Jets, Robert Saleh, with his being fired. Long story short is, on Monday of this week, the 7th, Aaron Rodgers had a meeting with the owner of the New York Jets. That was a phone call, and nobody really knows what was said in that phone call. On Tuesday, the head coach, Robert Saleh, was fired. On Wednesday, the media blew up about the fact that Aaron Rodgers had a phone call, and then the next day, Saleh was fired. Aaron Rodgers went on the Pat McAfee Show and gave his statement about what happened. I thought this was really interesting. Normally, I don't look at statements by athletes. I try to reserve most of my channel for looking at murder suspects, witnesses in big cases, things like that. But this particular instance is interesting because there are certain things that affect people's verbiage. I wanted to look at somebody who has literally spent their entire career being trained by professionals on how to speak to the media, how to present yourself at a podium, after a game, after an emotional event. How do you not say the wrong thing? This is the stuff that I geek out on. I'm going to show you the differences in the speech. Depending on who I'm looking at, depending on the subject, certain rules are going to stand out as indicators that that person uses when they're being deceptive. In looking at Aaron Rodgers' statement, it's no different. He uses some indicators and doesn't use other indicators. It's very interesting, but they don't have any training that prevents me from knowing that they're lying. My background is in human intelligence collection. I was a counterintelligence special agent. I was trained in human intelligence collection, interrogation, debriefing, polygraph, a bunch of stuff. If you want to see everything that I'm trained in, you can check out my bio on my homepage. Before we get into the actual analysis of the statement, I want to talk to you about some of the indicators that you're going to see. I will explain stuff as we go through it, but let's do a classroom session here before we get started. The first thing that I want to talk about is structure, the structure of the statement. A truthful statement looks like this. You have the introduction, which should be around 20% of the total story that you get. Then you have the main incident, which should be around 50%. And then you have the conclusion, which should be around 30%. Now, the reason why an honest statement always looks like that is because people are emotional. Those emotions affect every aspect of our lives. When a person goes through an incident, something that's important, something that inevitably is going to affect your emotional state, the end of the statement, that last 30%, the reason why that ends up being longer than the introduction is because what happened, the way that it affected you, is more important to you than the details of this is where I was, this is who was there. Those are just details so that the person that is hearing the story is not completely disoriented when you start talking. But nobody really cares about the introduction, the intro details. So you should have a short introduction followed by about half of your statement should be the main incident, because the main incident is what you're talking about. And then this is the part that throws people off. The conclusion is a little bit longer than you would expect because you have emotions based on it. If you were standing in a grocery store and somebody came in and robbed the place, okay, well, my introduction is going to be, I was in this grocery store at this time. That's it. That's all the introduction you need. Then there's the main incident. You're going to describe what happened, right? He came in, he looked like this, he pulled out this kind of a weapon. That's the part that is the juicy bits that everybody wants to hear about. But then the incident itself affected you. And you're going to talk about maybe how you felt as you were going to your car. The next time you walked into a grocery store, you were nervous. Those are the types of things that inevitably, after you finish the incident, you're going to talk a little bit about the effects that it has on you. Believe it or not, that's universal. That is what we call an objective indicator. So when I'm looking at a statement, I'm looking for one of two kinds of indicators. They're either objective or they are subjective. Objective indicators are great because when I see an objective indicator, I know immediately, straight up, this is a lie. It really makes my job easy. Subjective are indicators that some people use when there's sensitivity, meaning that what they did could cause embarrassment or it could be criminal. It might pertain directly to the incident. It might not. If somebody's accused of murder, but they were with their mistress that night, using their mistress as an alibi is something they may not want to do, you're going to get indicators there. You're going to get subjective indicators. Now, subjective indicators differ from person to person. I have a whole list of them. There are certain ones that each person likes to use when they're being deceptive. And you're going to see those repeated, and you're going to be able to link those to deception throughout the statement. And then you're going to see some indicators that are not directly tied to deception in somebody's statement. And you usually see those on an island by themselves. So you'll have a whole paragraph and you'll have one indicator thrown in there, one subjective indicator that's thrown in there in the middle. That doesn't mean anything. You have to have a little bit of training. Once you learn the rules, if you keep watching my videos, you will get a feel for how you can tell when the subjective indicators are leading you to deception and when they're just a standalone indicator. I always say a statement has to scream deception. What that means is that you have to see numerous indicators within each paragraph if there's deception there. This statement today is going to follow that very, very well. So to close up the topic of structure is an objective indicator. That means if somebody is wildly different on the structure than the structure that we talked about, that is objective deception. An example of that could be sometimes you'll see about 90% of a story is introduction, and then you get a very quick one line of the incident, and that's it, with nothing after that. It's either a 90-10 or an 80-10-10 statement. Those are objective deception. There's just no question. So there are certain things that are objective, meaning that just nobody violates those rules, meaning that it's deception 100% of the time. Another example of an objective indicator are pronouns. When I say we went to the store, I went to the store, so I'm trying to fix that, that's an objective indicator of deception. When somebody says we, it means there's two people. Your brain doesn't accidentally select the word we. It just can't do that. What's important here, as we go into this, I want you to understand that I'm going to point out things that are objective indicators of deception and things that are subjective. Subjective doesn't mean that I might think that it's deception and you might not think that it's deception. The subjective part is how the subject themselves uses various indicators. Before we jump into this analysis, I want to start by saying if you're a huge fan of Aaron Rodgers, you probably shouldn't watch this video. If you already have an opinion on the matter and you're not watching this video to see actual real deception detection, then you're not going to get anything from this. So you're either going to be really upset that I'm not supporting your hero, or you're going to be happy that I am supporting your hero, and you're not even going to be listening to what I'm telling you. So what I'm saying is you have to go into this with an open mind, and you have to listen to what I'm saying. If you've watched my channel before, you know I'm a big football fan. It just so happens that Aaron Rodgers was never really on my radar. Aaron Rodgers is a living legend. I was a little tentative of looking at his statement because if he's lying in this statement, I have a tendency to lose respect for people when I look at their statement and they're lying. But I gain a tremendous amount of respect if they're telling the truth. So it's rolling the dice for me when I look at the statement. But let's just go ahead and jump right into this. I did rephrase the questions a little bit because Pat McAfee, and he has another guy on the show with him, AJ, they ask questions, and sometimes those questions can be lengthy. So I cut this down to just the question so that you know exactly what Aaron Rodgers is responding to. And I put the questions in red. Aaron Rodgers' statements are in black, and then my notes are in purple. So first question is, the narrative that is growing around you is that you got Coach Saleh fired because you hate Coach Saleh. I would love to offer you the floor to explain how yesterday went down and how you think we got to this point that we're at with the New York Jets organization in 2024. In bold here, I put the question that he's responding to, which is you got Coach Saleh fired because you hate Coach Saleh. All right. If you are following this, you probably saw the shove hug, I guess, on the sidelines and are wondering, what does that mean? Well, let's see if we can get some clarity to all of this. The question is, did you get him fired because you hate him? And Aaron Rodgers starts by saying, yeah. Now, when somebody puts in a word, the literal meaning of the word, 99.9% of the time, it's meaningful. So when somebody puts yeah in there, then that is a direct answer to the question. However, that one in 1,000 is when somebody uses a word as a mental filler. Like the word is just a mental filler. It's when you're thinking about what word to say next. A lot of people do this. I do this, actually. I do this with the word so. Every time somebody asks me a question, I'll say the word so. I didn't know that I did that until I had to start editing my own videos here. And this is why I have to baseline first. He often starts by saying yeah. Yeah means that he has heard your question and he is processing it and you're about to get the answer. When Aaron Rodgers says yeah as the first word in his answer, it actually has no meaning. It's like saying So this does not directly tie to the question. So I just want to make that clear. Everything after the yeah has meaning. again, I do baseline everybody first. So I went through this, I transcribed it, and then I went through it just highlighting indicators without really looking at the meaning or the content. At that point, I've already gone through the statement twice. Then I baseline. So I'm already sort of familiar with the statement. And then I go through and I get a baseline. When I first started out here, I saw yeah. I knew because I had seen him start other paragraphs with yeah. I knew right off the bat as I'm baselining him that this is going to be part of his baseline. I make sure I have a very solid understanding of his baseline. And then I jump into analyzing for deception. So his answer here to whether or not he got him fired because he hates him. I mean, yesterday was a day that reminds you of the simple fact that all of us who played know all too well, and that it's a tough business. It's a beautiful profession. It's incredible. It's done so much for our lives, but it's also a really tough business. All right, I have to explain this at the beginning of each one of my series of videos. When I tell you this is a rehearsed statement, I know this because I've seen it 50 times through the rest of his statement already, and you're going to see it again and again. So just take my word on it. Just know that I've seen this a bunch already, and you're going to see it again too. This is rehearsed. And it makes sense because you hear this all the time. If you watch athletes speak at the podium, know all too well, it's a tough business. It's a beautiful profession. It's incredible. It's done so much for our life. This is a statement that he's probably said this 1,000 times to the media over his career, and he will inject it a few times here as well. And now he says, I love Coach Saleh. I love Coach Saleh. There's a formula that we use to determine whether it's possible that something stated could be truthful, which is that it has to use I, has to be in past tense, unless you're talking about something in present tense. Normally, you're talking about an incident that happened in the past, so it's supposed to be past tense and active voice. All right, so we ran the I love Coach Saleh through our formula, and it checks out. However, we still need to look at some of the pertinent words each time that we analyze a statement, because the word love has no definitive definition, meaning that people can use it to mean a whole slew of different things. When you have a word that is used in movies a lot differently than the way it's used in real life, or you just have a word that has a lot of different potential meanings, then it's very hard to assign a truth label to it. So when he says, I love Coach Saleh, it doesn't really mean anything, because love could be romantic. It could be a coach-player relationship. What we're looking for when we get a very generic statement like that is, well, what else do we see? We got to take everything in its totality here and see if we can add some clarity to some vague statements like this.
A really tough business. I love Coach Saleh. We have a very solid relationship. We have since, I met him in 2021. A really tough business. I love Coach Saleh.
Then he says, we have a very solid relationship. We have a repeating word here, and I'll tell you that repeating words is not Aaron Rodgers' baseline. He is very articulate. He thinks through what he's going to say, and then he says it, and he's clearly very used to speaking to the press or the media. So when he starts to double up on words, that's pertinent for us. He says, we have a very solid relationship. Now, what does solid mean? We have a solid relationship. Technically, that doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It just means that it's in stone. So again, now this is still a generic word. He doesn't say we have a very good relationship, and he doesn't say we have a very bad relationship. He says we have a very solid relationship. That can be an indicator in and of itself when somebody purposefully uses words that sound good, but the meaning of them is very vague. Again, we now have two vague statements, but we're not assigning anything to that yet. So since I met him in 2021. So we have since is a reduction of commitment statement. It literally means that you're trying to imply something. And when you say it's a bit of a reciprocity statement where you give the listener a role in understanding, and so that they have a personal buy-in to what you're saying. So when you say, how the listener becomes drawn into what you're saying, and it's often used as an indicator of deception. However, if they're talking about something that you actually do know about, then it's used to reinforce what you're saying. So this is one of those terms that it's important that we understand the context here. Now, he says, we have since, and he's getting to, I met him in 2021, but he interjects a in here. We have since I met him in 2021 and had a nice conversation when they came and visited us for joint practices. He was a big reason why I came to the Jets. All right, this is the correct pronoun. It's in the correct tense, and this is a direct statement. It's not vague like the other ones. So he says, he was a big reason why I came to the Jets. One of the rules that we live by is that we believe what people tell us. The only way that we can not believe deception is if we do believe when there's no deception. And so when we have a statement like this, we believe it. He says, he was a big reason why I came to the Jets. So I'm going to believe that. And then he says, I felt like the team, was a solid team. Okay, this is problematic. To have now interjected in here twice is a problem. Aaron Rodgers doesn't talk like that. And I am going to throw in a baseline statement from him so that you can see he does have entire paragraphs where he doesn't double up on words. He doesn't say, he doesn't have any reduction in commitment. He's a very good articulate speaker, which means that as soon as he starts to slip away from that, it becomes very apparent. That's why people who they're more intelligent, more articulate, are they better at lying? No, it's actually they're worse because they give nice, perfect paragraphs of stuff that they're being honest about. And then you start seeing indicators where they're being deceptive and it becomes very obvious. I will tell you that Aaron Rodgers uses as an indicator of deception. He doesn't say it in a way that brings you into the conversation. He is trying to think of a way to say what he doesn't want to say. How can I be deceptive about this in a way that's not obvious? So you get the That's how he uses it. So we want to be careful about what we're looking at when it's surrounded by knows. Okay, so I felt like the team, was a solid team. Had a relationship with Coach Hackett, obviously. This is a missing I statement here. When somebody leaves out the word I where there should be an I, then that is extremely problematic. He says, had a relationship with Coach Hackett, obviously. We have two indicators here. There's the missing I, and then he says, with Coach Hackett. He doesn't say, Coach Hackett and I had a relationship, or Coach Hackett and I have a relationship. He says, had a relationship with Coach Hackett, obviously, which tells me that he had a relationship. He says he had a relationship. I believe that he did have a relationship, but the lack of I and the word with means conflict. This states that there was some sort of conflict, probably this season, and that relationship has deteriorated. This is just me speculating, but the Jets haven't done very well on offense this year, and because Coach Hackett is the offensive coordinator, it's possible that Aaron Rodgers blames Coach Hackett on his poor start to this season. And then he says, and I really liked Coach Saleh. So he introduced Coach Saleh as Coach Saleh. And then he says, I really liked Coach Saleh. Okay, when I combine this with this statement here, he was a big reason why I came to the Jets. There is truth and there is deception in here. So he says, I love Coach Saleh. Again, that's generic, but I do believe that this part in here had a nice conversation when they came and visited us for joint practices. He was a big reason why I came to the Jets. So I do believe that he did like Coach Saleh. He calls him Coach Saleh. Now, the second time that you talk about somebody after you've introduced them, the way that you talk about them, you should get their preferred, respectful way of referring to them. When you are introducing, I like to use names from Family Guy just because I just do that all the time. It just gives me a bank of names that I can draw from. So if Peter is introducing Lois, the first time he's going to say, my wife, Lois. And then he might shorten that to my wife, or he might shorten that to Lois, depending on what he likes to call her. So when somebody says Coach Saleh, and then the second time they refer to him as Coach Saleh. Now, I played football in high school, didn't play in college, wasn't good enough, but this is the respectful way to refer to him. So we have in this intro paragraph, I see respect from Aaron Rodgers to Coach Saleh here. He calls him Coach Saleh. In high school, we always called our coaches coach. That's the respectful term. You call them coach and then their name. Sometimes it's coach and their first name. Sometimes it's coach and their last name. But coach is a respectful term. So we are going to look for changes in language. That's a big, very important thing for us is if somebody starts calling somebody something different, it means there's a change in verbiage, means a change in reality. It means his reality changed. So we know at this point, he is being respectful. Coach Saleh, Coach Saleh. That tells me that this whole paragraph is generally truthful. We do have some you-knows in here, but it's very specifically, I felt like the team, was a solid team. So as he thinks back on this, his reservations in this paragraph are really about the team. And then we do see a little bit of conflict with Coach Hackett. Now let's move on. So everything that Matt LaFleur said about him, the few interactions I've had, the times that we went against him, I just had a lot of respect for him. And so, it was just a reminder yesterday how tough the business is. So we get a again here, but it goes into a rehearsed statement. Okay, so we have a little bit of coming out of the past and into the present here, and we have a here. Actually, we have a so as well. So is an explanatory statement followed by So we know that we're getting into a shady area here with a subjective indicator like but we'll see how this continues. I think what people can forget in this is not only is Robert a fantastic human being and a damn good football coach, he's also a family man. He's got 7 kids, he's got an incredible wife, and the business of football can be hard, not just on those of us who are playing and coaching and doing personnel things and ownership, obviously, but it's tough on the families. And I've got to know Robert's family over the last couple of years, and especially one of his kids, Adam. Adam's my little throwing buddy from training camp. Love Adam. He's an incredible, incredible kid. Okay. It hurt me to read this paragraph, and let me tell you why. We start with a doubling up of a word here, which is not good. That's not a good sign. That's a subjective indicator, and he doesn't do that. So this means we're walking into sensitivity here. I think what people can forget in this is not only is Robert. So we have 2 doubled up words, which means he's having trouble getting this out. Then we have a change of language from Coach Saleh to Robert. To hear somebody refer to their coach as just their first name, it almost sounds derogatory. It almost sounds like a derogatory term. It just sounds bad. It hits the ear wrong. So there's something that changed from the time that he joined the Jets organization, specifically with Robert Saleh, to today. I think what people can forget in this is not only is Robert a fantastic human being and a damn good football coach, he's also a family man. All right, this right here, this is where people get confused between deception detection and seeing what you want to see. So, all right, let's look at this again. Let's look at the deception in here. We have a repeating of the word what. I think what people can forget in this is not only is. We have 2 times where words are repeated. Why are those indicators of deception? It's because your brain is literally thinking too slowly. Your brain is designed to be able to think using your frontal lobe and using your Broca area, right, about here-ish. That functions simultaneously as your frontal lobe, which means you can very easily think and speak at the same time. The things that people overlook here are when your frontal lobe is trying to edit what your Broca section is sending to them, which is always the truth. It doesn't know how to pull something that's not the truth. It's your frontal lobe that has to edit that. So it takes time, and you find yourself saying words and your brain isn't keeping up because you're fabricating. You have to figure out what you want to say and how you want to say it because it's not the truth. If it was the truth, you just spit it out. So you end up with these repeating words. And in this sentence, you have it twice. Instead of looking at real indicators of what your brain is doing in order to come up with the words that you're trying to portray here, people have a tendency to look at what looks like the interesting part of the sentence. So not only is Robert a fantastic human being and a damn good football coach, he's also a family man. Those all sound very emotionally charged, and those are completely meaningless. They mean nothing to anybody here. This is rehearsed. This is the way that he is trained and practices speaking. Locker room talk, that ability to speak in a way that gives people an emotional reaction and makes them say, yeah, I want to hear that. That's a good speech, that kind of thing. It's this sort of charged language. A fantastic human being, a damn good football coach. He throws in damn just because football is a violent sport there. All of this is manipulation. This is where manipulation comes in. This is the stuff that you consciously think about. It's the stuff you're not consciously thinking about that I focus on. Now, what do we really see here? We really see a change in language. This is where he no longer calls Coach Saleh, but he calls him Robert. Calling your coach, coach. It's above a title. It's actually a term of respect. And to strip somebody of the title of coach is very disrespectful. And when he changes his language from Coach Saleh to Robert, we want to look and see what's the difference between these two. And when he calls him Coach Saleh, that was in 2021. And now we're in the present in 2024, and he's calling him Robert. That tells me that something happened between 2021 and 2024 that changed Aaron Roberts' mind, that changed the way he feels about Coach Saleh in a way that is subtly disrespectful to him. So don't pay so much attention to the inflammatory parts. The damn good football coach, he knows he's supposed to say stuff like that. He practices that. And a family man, oh, that really gets the emotions going. He's a family man. Now let's think about this. He's got 7 kids. He's got an incredible wife, and the business of football can be hard. All of this, once you understand how the brain works and how to manipulate your audience, this becomes very shallow and empty. He's just saying words. He's got 7 kids. Who cares? What was the question again? The question was, you got Coach Saleh fired because you hate Coach Saleh. So why do we have all of this talking about stuff that has nothing to do with the question? Well, you're going to see this goes back to structure here. So let's see, not just those of us who are playing and coaching and doing personnel things and ownership, obviously, but it's tough on the families. And I've got to know Robert's family. We have, I forgot to highlight this one here. He says Robert again. So I want you to notice that this really is due to this part of your brain pulling from a memory that's stored in a different area of your brain than the memory of Coach Saleh. That part of his brain is going to continue to pull the name Robert because it's disrespectful. And he's remembering, as he talks about Coach Saleh in the present, he can only pull from that section of his brain. So he's going to continue to pull that word over and over again. If it was random, then you would see sometimes it would be Coach Saleh, sometimes it would be Robert, and it would be blended in. You'd see Robert up in 2021 and you'd see Coach Saleh in the present, but you don't. It's very clearly delineated in his speech. So let's keep going here, but it's tough on the families. Now, I was really hoping that it wouldn't come down to this. Honestly, I never even thought that this was going to happen, but this really, I don't know the right word to describe this. This upset me when I saw this, and I'm just going to read it to you and see if you can tell by the indicators that you know so far why this knocked the respect that I had for Aaron Rodgers down a couple pegs here. Because he says, and I've got to know Robert's family over the last couple of years, and especially one of his kids, Adam. So now he's making this very personal. This better be sincere, because if you are just pulling on people's heartstrings and using Robert Saleh's kids as a weapon for your own agenda, that is really dirty. So then he says, Adam's my little throwing buddy from training camp. Love Adam. Okay. There's no way of reading this that sounds right. So love Adam. He should say, I love Adam. That is the only way of saying that correctly. To say love Adam, it's like the end of a letter, love Adam. And it's wrong. And he can't put I in front of it because he doesn't mean it. He literally rehearsed this as something that he wanted to put in order to manipulate the way that you feel about this. But he doesn't feel it. It's not coming from his memory. And he has no commitment to what he's saying. There's no I in this statement. Love Adam.
See, one of his kids, Adam. Adam's my little throwing buddy from training camp. Love Adam.
He's an incredible, incredible kid. Now, he's repeating incredible twice. That is different than stumbling on a word. He is purposefully repeating it twice. This is the same type of indicator as uncontracting words. It's doubling down on the meaning. It's hitting this really hard. He's an incredible, incredible kid. The only way that that's truthful, okay, let me back up a little bit. You remember how I was saying when you have the structure, the end of the structure should be about 30%? Because we have emotions, and emotions are important to us. And when somebody puts out something like, he is an incredible, incredible kid, I call it a double stamp. When you're double stamping something, that's not stumbling on a word, that's double stamping it. When you double stamp, you need an explanation after that, because that means that it is so powerful to you that you really want your audience to feel that power and that emotion. That means he should follow that up. If it's a truthful story, I find myself waiting for the explanation. Did he overcome something? Why is Adam so incredible? Like I've bought into this story now. And he says, he's an incredible, incredible kid. And then that's it, because it's not real. He's fabricating that in a vacuum, and there's nothing else to that story. He's just trying to appeal to your emotions. So when someone like myself, an empath, sees somebody who is manipulating your emotions, it really has a visceral reaction in me. I really, really despise this type of emotional manipulation. Well, let's keep going here. And so I'm thinking there's obviously a lot of emotions. Okay, what? Let's see. What was this sentence? This is a full sentence. So I'm thinking there's obviously a lot of emotions. Okay, that's troublesome because this is word salad. He's trying to make you think that he's referencing Coach Saleh being fired, but that's not what he says. He just says a bunch of words and then a lot of emotion. But you think about the family and the kids as much as the people you love, your own family, who is the coaching staff and the players, and what they're all going through. Okay, you can tell most people without any training at all know that when you're just putting in a ton of words before your point, that's deception. People know they're being lied to when you get just line after line after line after line of stuff that has nothing to do with the topic at hand. That's what this is. This is a bunch of filler. And now he was making sense with his sentences up to this point. But you can see the longer that the filler goes, the harder it is to continue to make coherent sentences, because your mind is stuck on answering this question. His brain is trying to answer this question, and he's trying to not answer the question. And so you're getting to the point where it's almost nonsense. So, anybody who's kind of championing this decision, I would just appeal to the humanity of the situation and remind you there's other people involved. Okay, what does that mean? There's emotions and there's other people involved, and then there's 100 words in here. But there is one thing that's pertinent here, which he says, so anybody who's kind of championing this decision. Why? What he's doing now is he's saying that I'm not the one who hates Robert Saleh. It's the viewers. It's you guys out there who are hating on Robert Saleh. And if you're championing this decision, then you need to take a look at yourself. And that is classic gaslighting, basically. I mean, it's taking the question that is asked of him and basically turning it around on everybody else. But we have a reduction in commitment of the word championing. So who is championing this decision, and why would he be reducing the commitment to that? If he's scolding you for championing Robert Saleh's being fired, why would he reduce the commitment on that? And that's the only reason that you would see reduction of commitment on a word like championing that is a very meaningful. It's not like these other words we've seen, like a solid relationship. This has a ton of meaning in the word championing. And he is the one who has been accused of championing Robert Saleh's being fired. So if that in his mind, if he says that, if he's trying to put that on you, but he knows in his head that he is the one championing it, you're going to see this mitigation, this reduction of commitment right before he says the word championing. What this tells me is I just got a little glimpse into his mind right here, that he sees himself as the champion of this decision, because when he tries to turn it around on you, he has to reduce the commitment, because nobody likes to think badly of themselves. Hopefully that makes sense. And then as soon as he says this, you get and remind you there's other people involved. Okay. He can't even say his family at this point. Now it's just a bunch of words. So don't overlook that, is what I'm saying. Words are important, and people don't just spout out random words. People will say directly what the answer to the question is if their answer is honest. Okay, and then he continues here. He doesn't get interrupted or anything, so this is all one train of thought. And Adam has to go to school today, possibly, or this week. When I edit all of this together, I'm going to show you his body language here, because he has body language that goes directly in line with his thought process. What I want to explain to you right now is something that we call a reduction of commitment, that has to do with either a one-sided shoulder shrug like this, or a two-sided shoulder shrug, which is basically shrugging your shoulders, which is more like this. Or you'll see one side go up. Sorry, if I'm looking away from the camera, I have to look at myself on the screen to see how it's coming across. So you'll see one shoulder go up and then the other one slightly follow. What your brain is doing that makes your body do that is reducing the commitment to what you say. If you lift one shoulder without the other one moving at all, it means that what you're saying is 100% false. Your brain literally will not accept what you're saying, and you get a one-sided shoulder shrug. Now let's think about for a second what a shoulder shrug, a two-sided, both-sided shoulder shrug means. It means you don't know the answer to something. So it is, by definition, a reduction of commitment. You will see a normal shoulder shrug quite often when people are talking, when they're trying to describe something that they don't have 100% knowledge about. So if I ask you basically an opinion question, I want your opinion. Why do you think that Coke became more popular than Pepsi during that battle in the 1980s? I would expect you to think about that for a second and then to start your answer and say, well, they did all of these in-person taste tests. I would expect an answer like, I guess Pepsi didn't do as well. When you see me, you get all of that in context, and you don't probably even notice the shoulder shrugging. You know that I was asked for my opinion and I'm giving you my opinion, and I know that my opinion isn't rock solid. I mean, I don't have any inside knowledge on it. And so I'm just giving you my opinion, and my shoulders represent that. If someone says, I heard that you're having a difficult time in your marriage with your spouse, and someone says this, I love my wife. Do you see when you watch me do that? I love my wife. Your reaction to that without any training should be, that looks wrong. When somebody is telling you something that they know about, but their body is saying that they don't know it, that's a reduction of commitment. And that reduction of commitment means that I don't believe what I'm saying. And so you have a one-sided shoulder shrug, definitive deception. A regular shoulder shrug means if it's your opinion, it's okay. But if you're stating a fact, especially if it's a known fact or what's supposed to be a known fact, then you're expecting to see a shoulder shrug. Okay.
And remind you there's other people involved. And Adam has to go to school today, possibly, or this week. And hopefully there's no,
to see a shoulder shrug. Okay. So when Aaron Rodgers says that Adam has to go to school today, possibly, or this week, you see the shoulder shrug because he actually doesn't know that. And so it's a bit of a baseline there. He shrugs his shoulders when he doesn't know something or when he has no commitment to what he's saying. And I'm going to use this as a baseline example because you can see him correct himself. You know that when he says he has to go to school today, and then he says, possibly, or this week, that he's guessing. And that's okay because his verbiage explains that he's guessing, that it might be, maybe he has to go to school today, maybe he has to go to school in a couple of days. He's telling you that he doesn't know that. And his shoulder shrug is in line with that. It makes sense. But it shows you the way that he expresses himself with his shoulders. And so now I know that anytime that he's not 100% sure of something, he's going to shrug his shoulders. But if you see him shrug his shoulders and he doesn't correct what he says, that's a problem. So that's how we baseline people with their body language. All right, so let's keep going here. And I'm going to show you throughout this video parts where his body language doesn't marry up with what he's saying. And hopefully there's no, kids with poor parents who are making snide side comments to him. It's just a reminder. There's a lot of things involved in this as far as any of the ridiculous allegations out there. So what does that have to do with Adam? Nothing. But let's take note here. When we talked about the structure, there's a correct amount of time that it takes to answer a question. Think of it like this. When somebody's asking a question that you know the answer to, are you having an affair? When Lois asked Peter, are you having an affair? Are you cheating on me with Bonnie? If he's not, he knows that he's not. There's no searching your memory banks for trying to figure out, was I? I can't remember if I did or not. No, those types of things are on the forefront of your mind. And so when somebody asks you a question that is sensitive, the longer it takes you to answer, the more you're fabricating that answer, that response. And as the person asking the question, I know that if you're not having an affair and I say, are you cheating on me? And you sit there for over 2 seconds, at 2 seconds, it becomes 100%. It's a lie. That's an objective lie. Because think about it now. If I ask you, are you cheating on your spouse? If you're not cheating on your spouse, you're going to say no. The truth comes so fast because you're not fabricating anything. So if you sit there for a full second, no. Now I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's having some conversations with someone, that maybe he's only sparking these conversations because that person's attractive. maybe they're not cheating. Now, if I ask that question and that person takes over 2 seconds to respond, that's a long silence. 2 seconds to respond to a question they know the answer to is a really long time. If they take 25 seconds in order to respond to that question, okay, you know there's a problem. A truthful answer to a question takes 3 lines. There's almost no question that's going to take more than 3 lines to explain the answer to when you're asked a direct question, because you don't need to set the stage for it. There's simply the introduction is going to be minimal because they're asking a direct question. And so this isn't a completely open statement where I say just start at the beginning and end at the end. This is a question. You got Coach Sala fired because you hate Coach Sala. So you can skip most of the intro and just answer the question. Once you hit 4 lines, this becomes an area of sensitivity that I have to really pay attention to. If you're between 4 to 8 lines, this area right here, that is extremely sensitive. And I need to really take a deep dive into your answer to figure out if there really is something that you have to explain. Because some questions, they might be a direct question, but you're not really going to understand the answer unless you get a little bit of context. So that's why this is the gray area. The gray that I highlighted here, this is the gray area. At 9 lines, it is a 100% chance that the person who's answering your question is lying. It's objective. It means that that person is only throwing in filler because lying is extremely stressful and it takes a lot of mental energy and you have to figure out what you're going to say. 3 lines is what it should take Aaron Rodgers to answer this question. If he's going to be chatty, then we want to look at what he's saying, but we'll give him up to 8 lines. It took him 24 lines before he starts to answer the question. He says, kids with poor parents who are making snide side comments to him, referring to Adam, which is just filler at this point. It's just a reminder. There's a lot of things. All right, this is extremely sensitive. Now he's repeating entire phrases. So you see how as we get closer and closer to the deception, the pressure mounts, the stress is mounting in him. Now, when you watch him, you don't see that because he's a cool cucumber. I mean, he's been doing this his whole life. He's lived his entire professional career under the most extremely stressful circumstances other than combat. To have millions of people watching you, it gets you used to a certain level of pressure. And so he's very good at controlling, I don't want to say controlling his body language during deception because he's really not very good at controlling his body language when it comes to deception, but he's good at looking cool. That's the part that professional athletes practice extensively. It's part of their image, their persona. And so he really looks cool when he's talking, but we can see here the stress amping up. We have then we have entire phrases being repeated here. There's a lot of things involved in this as far as any of the ridiculous allegations out there. So he hasn't addressed anything specifically yet. I'm not going to spend more than 1 sentence in response to it. If you're wondering what the definition of irony is, it's this. So he says 1 sentence, that's the 25th line. Now I didn't go through and actually count the sentences, but it's a lot more than 1. So I'm not going to spend more than 1 sentence in response to it, and that is that. Okay, repeating extreme sensitivity. For Aaron Rodgers, that's actually an indicator of deception because he doesn't ever do that. He actually speaks very articulately. He doesn't repeat words when he's talking about generic stuff. So that is that. I resent any of those accusations because they're patently false. And it's interesting the amount of power that people think I have. Then he pauses and he says, which I don't, but I love Robert. And it was, one of those days yesterday. All right, let's dive into the actual answer to the question here. We already know that based on deception detection rules, this is a 100% lie. There's no possibility that there's any truth to this because it took more than 9 lines to get here. And if you're thinking, maybe there's a good reason for it. If you look back at this, it's all filler. It's all filler, down to the point where he's just throwing out a jumble of words, an entire paragraph that literally has no point to it. And so you can see how the words just keep flowing. Now, this should be a denial. And that's one of the rules in here. Before we go too heavily into this, let's go through my notes. So I mean is a pre-deception tag. After going through his entire statement, I can tell that he says I mean when he's about to lie. So I call it a pre-deception tag. That means that he's tagging whatever he's about to say as being deceptive. All right, truthful answer will come in the first 3 lines. By line 9, the answer is 100% misrepresenting reality. This took 26 lines. I've had that happen one other time, and it was in a murder trial. So that is just, it's definitive. But we'll keep going. Aaron Rodgers called Robert Saleh Coach Saleh when they met in 2021. In the present, we have a change of language to Robert. So notice here he says, I love Coach Saleh, but this is when he was referring to 2021. This whole paragraph is 2021. And then here he says, I love Robert. So again, we have a definitive change of language. Everything that's in reference to after this initial meeting in 2021, Coach Saleh is Robert, Robert's family, and I love Robert. And it was, one of those days. All right, we have the change of language, which means there's a change in their reality. Discussing family and the beautiful profession of football are fillers to delay answering the question. Is a filler and indicates a delay in an upcoming lie. It's buying time to think of more fillers. We have an explanatory statement plus kind of, which is here, the explanatory statement. So, anybody who's kind of championing this decision. This is a reduction in commitment in order to reduce the guilt of championing this decision. So, as you reduce commitment, you reduce the emotional tie that goes to it. So, anybody who's kind of championing this decision, he's very hesitant on punishing himself. And you'll see later why. Okay, the truth will always be revealed somewhere in the statement. Aaron Rodgers identifies as championing this decision. Almost all the time, you're going to see somebody's true motivation come through somewhere, either their actual motive for committing a crime or their motivation for doing something. So this, I think, and we'll see what we see later on in the statement, but this seems like championing this decision is a really bizarre way of saying that. Anybody who's championing this decision, who said anything about championing the decision? So the fact that that's on his mind means it's pertinent to him. So we have that. And then that is that. The word that equals distance. This means closeness. That means distance. That's just from the dictionary. We do use that in deception detection, but there's nothing subjective about that. That literally means distance, and this literally means closeness. When somebody says that is that, it's doubling down, it's double stamping the distance there. And that, for Aaron Rodgers, is a post-deception tag. So he really likes, before he is deceptive about something, he likes to say, I mean, and then after he's finished the deception, he says, that's that. This is the most fundamentally important rule of deception detection. Number 1, we always believe the truth. If somebody tells you the truth, you believe them. If somebody says, I didn't do it, then I will believe them. Now, because more people watch my videos, more people are going to start using that, and it's going to be harder to tell if somebody's being truthful if they've seen my channel. But in normal everyday life, if somebody says, I didn't do it, or I didn't kill her, or I didn't cheat on you, if somebody says, I didn't, and then doing it is what follows, it's truthful. They didn't do it. But if they didn't say that they didn't do it, they did it, because they have a chance to clear their name, and all they have to do is believe what they're telling you. And if they don't believe what they're telling you, then I don't believe what they're telling you. So Aaron Rodgers doesn't deny his involvement. Let's go back and look at this now. He says, I resent any of those accusations. Now, there's multiple accusations. There's accusations that he hates him. There's accusations that he was using his influence to get him fired. And there's accusations that he directly told the owner to fire him and got him fired. So there's multiple accusations going around out there, and he chooses to not define that. And when you have literally your reputation on the line, when you've been accused of something egregious, and this is your chance, all eyes are on you, nobody's interrupting you, and you have a chance to say, I didn't do it. If you can't say that, then that's hugely problematic. So he says, I resent any of those accusations. So now he's saying that you're upsetting him. So he's turning the tables on you for even asking that question. I resent any of those accusations. And he's not even telling you which accusations. At this point, he's being super vague, because that's an explanatory statement. They're patently false. Okay, it makes people so uncomfortable to lie directly that they will choose words that sound similar that are not what they're saying. So to say that undefined accusations are patently false is telling you literally nothing. He literally told you nothing there. What he could have said is, Robert Saleh is a good friend of mine. I really like him. I've respected him from day one, and I didn't have anything to do with him being fired. I don't hate him. I like him a lot. And I did talk to the owner on Monday, blah, 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 whatever. He either could have had no input on it, or he could have said, yeah, the owner asked me. And I said, you do what you feel is best. And I'll play under anybody because I'm here to play. You know, that type of response, hopefully just you hearing me say that sort of rings a bell like, yeah, that actually does sound right. And you really understand why this is so wrong. All right. So basically, I mean, there's a lot more to this statement, but we have all the information that we need at this point. When you truly understand deception detection, it screams deception. So let's keep going, and we'll try and breeze through the rest of this stuff. I'm not going to hit it so hard because basically we got the main question, and I have numerous objective indicators.
I love Coach Saleh. Solid relationship we have since I met him in 20, and I really liked Coach Saleh. The few interactions I've had, the times that we went against, I just had a lot of respect for him. Especially one of his kids, Adam. Adam's my little throwing buddy from training. Adam has to go to school today, possibly, or this week. And
indicators of deception in there.